to season 4 of Awkward Insurance. If you're a regular here, then you already know that Ashley Fitzsimmons, who hails from Pennsylvania but is now based out of Ohio, is joining the podcast as a regular co-host. I'm so excited. I got to know Ashley in 2020 when Awkward Insurance first started, and honestly, I never anticipated that we'd still be here, but that's all because of you, the listeners, and our phenomenal guests. You guys are so amazing that we started a Facebook group for you in 2022, and over 700 of you have already joined. That is amazing. So Ashley, welcome to season 4.
Thank you so much, Dustin. What a nice introduction. I really appreciate it. You know, you said you can't believe that we're still here. I can't believe someone's giving me a permanent spot on a podcast that they trust me enough with a microphone. So this is pretty exciting. I mean, even from our first meeting, things were awkward, that's why I love you. So I'm so excited to go through this entire season with you.
I know. Yeah, in terms of trusting them with the microphone, I can't believe they trust me with a microphone and continue to trust me with a microphone. It's crazy. Our season 4 starter is with Elisa Stampf, the CEO and co-founder of Insure Equality. Ashley wasn't able to make it for this episode, and she has an episode on the Bound and Determined podcast with Meg McKean to bring light to the issues on why that was. But again, I'm so excited that we are here opening up Elisa's episode together.
Definitely. And let me tell you, I listened to this podcast and I am so bummed that I had to miss out on this one.
She's amazing.
Seriously, in the first 25 minutes alone, I was just kind of jotting things down and I found myself saying, yes, and shaking my head constantly. Yes! I mean, Elisa just gets it. And the most important thing I want to emphasize during this episode when people are listening to it is you are not alone. I think one of the best examples about this is when Elisa was talking about a time she was having an off day during a meeting and somebody in that group recognized it and said, hey, what's going on? What's wrong? And she shared her story with the entire group. And she said, without missing a beat, every single woman in that room went around and talked about what they had been through in the industry that was similar. And she said it was just so cool because for that moment, there was so much community in that room. And it's so important to remember, guys, we're not really reinventing the wheel here in insurance. If we've gone through it, somebody else has probably gone through it. So just, if you need help, reach out, talk to somebody. There's going to be someone out there to help you.
Absolutely. I love all of those points. You are not alone, and I am not alone because you are here with me now. So let's just dive right into the episode. Elisa Stampf, hopefully I said the last name right. We practiced the first name, but I think I got the last name right. Did I get it?
You did. A thumbs up. No, absolutely. You get points on both of those.
Yes, I love it. She is the co-founder of Insure Equality, and she is with me today. She describes herself as a perennial optimist working within the insurance industry to make it a more welcoming place to work, advance, and lead. And God knows that we need all of that right now. She's been an underwriter, a marketing rep, an agent, but now she is the CEO of Spearheading change in our industry by way of insureequality.org and phoenixrise.org. Elisa, welcome to Awkward Insurance. I can calm down now.
Well, thank you. No, I have been just as nervous. I think you hopped on and I said, I'm fangirling too. So we can both kind of take the nerves off a bit. I think at this point, we're friends, right? Social media / internet / podcast.
You heard it here. We're friends and we only met 2 minutes ago.
We got it.
So I'm so excited that you're here today. Where do you hail from? Where are you sitting right now?
I'm sitting in Chicago with a lot of construction going on behind me, so I'm hopeful that's not coming through, but it certainly has messed with my internet over the past, a little bit. And I totally sneaked and listened to a few of your podcasts, so I know that you're a millennial too, because we share so we share that.
Is it because I'm wearing a hoodie?
I mean, I almost wore my hoodie and I just was like, no, I'll wear a shirt, but now I'm kind of regretting not wearing the hoodie. But I don't know what part of millennial you fall in, but I would have been sort of like the elder.
The weird part?
Yeah, I'm in the weird part too. The awkward insurance millennial part.
Exactly.
I graduated when the market crashed in 2008, which is so funny because now I feel like, not funny, haha, funny, ironic, we're kind of almost in that stage again. It feels very similar to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no. I think I was actually in the car yesterday and just something on the radio was like, some poll or whatever says that we are in a recession right now. I know there's like a lot of debate whenever that stuff starts to happen. It's like, are we not? What qualifies as a recession? Is it a mini recession, a big recession?
True.
But it's like, we are in a recession. Oh my gosh, the last time we were in a recession, I was officially an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. I was lucky to have avoided the housing bubble. I was very new into the job market. I was officially an adult, but like put adult in quotations for that, because I had just graduated college. I vividly remember I literally walked into our coffee shop, which was right across from our registrar office and some business offices. And I had just turned in my early graduation paperwork because I graduated a semester early because I had everything I needed. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, ooh, I'm going to get ahead, or there's going to be like, I'm going to get into the job market sooner. I'll be doing well. And then I drop off the paperwork. I turn around, I go to grab a sandwich, and I see the news, and there it is, market crash. And I was like, oh no, like, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to have a job? And that was the time that you needed like 3 to 5 years of experience fresh out of college.
Yeah.
And so everybody was like, what do I do? Like, how do I like transition into this market? And I feel like we're feeling that now with what's happening, especially in insurance.
Oh, do you feel like the job market is hitting that same level? Because when you first started talking, I was thinking like, where was I, in terms of my personal life? And then I started recalling, at the time I worked for an agency that was a bank-owned agency. It was a regional broker, if you will, owned by a bank. And the hiring freeze, I was the last one that they hired in my department. And, like last one in, first one out.
Yep.
Is the way. And I felt nervous. It was like 2007, 2008. So I remember that now that so you feel like we're at a stage where there's going to be hiring freezes, or?
I wouldn't say necessarily hiring freezes, but the angst, the underlying kind of feelings are very, very much the same. While it's maybe not the same situation, because you and I certainly weren't dealing with a pandemic and a recession at the same time. That was just, we were dealing with a housing crisis and a recession at the same time, but not this. I think what we're feeling now is very unique, but it still has that same level of what do I do? Because I'm talking with people that are hiring managers, not just in insurance, but people come to me all the time doing what we do. And I'm hearing a lot of what's happening. And while people are saying there's a lot of jobs open, those jobs are getting 300 to 500 resumes for entry to mid-level. So it kind of harkens back to the conversation that you had with Tracy and with Ashley of like, people can't even get past the resume stage. Right. So while there might not be a hiring freeze, you might be sending out dozens of resumes and not getting that call that you need. Not because you're not worth it or that you're not talented or you don't have all the things, but how do you separate yourself from a crowd of 300 to 500 resumes?
Yeah.
That's really difficult to do.
Especially when we're interacting so much, online or whatever. So I was actually talking to somebody recently. They're looking, to add somebody to their agency, but they're a well-established agency, more local, not very, it's not like it's a national agency or anything, very established within the community. And so their needs for local talent are very solid. Like they don't have the vision or even see the option to pick from the global or even national or even state market for that matter for talent acquisition. So in terms of the jobs that are out there, somebody might go in and, have a resume that they might drop off there. They might go in, whatever. But you and I, we're interacting right now via video. And that's a lot of the ways that people are, so you're having to electronically send that resume. How do you stand out? That's a great conversation. I don't think it's very in the purview of our conversation today, but that is a great, thing to think about is how do you separate yourself from that? And interesting in terms of, where we're at as this maybe recession. I'm not really committed to saying it's a recession net, but I'm not an economist either. So I'm kind of on the cusp of being in denial, just keeping my head in the sand, right? So let's kind of reopen up the floor and get away from that conversation a little bit. Let's get to know you a little bit. Who is Elisa, other than the fact that we share a commonality that our names are commonly mispronounced, and we both got them right on the first try today, so that was awesome. Who is Elisa? What do you do? What are you about?
Man, how do you describe that so quickly? I was born into a military family, so I've lived all over the country. That's probably a large part of who I am. I'm the perennial new kid. always the new kid on the block showing up. I also love talking to people and meeting new people. That for me is something that when people ask what's a good connection for you, I really have a hard time nailing that down because I just want to talk to anybody. There's value in every conversation that I find. Conversations like this, conversations with people in other industries telling you what's going on. It's how we keep our finger on the pulse, but it's also how you get to know what's out there and learning from different perspectives. I think for me, because I was the perennial new kid, because I did grow up in a pretty tumultuous household when I was younger, I think a lot more about perspective, and I think a lot about how people come into a place and how they feel when they get there. And that's really kind of the background story of me that was budding and growing and blooming even before my big event that kind of pushed me to bring a whole bunch of people together to do what we're doing today, which is Insure Equality and making insurance a more welcoming place, like you alluded to at the beginning. But me in a nutshell, I'm always 1 degree outside of normal. I grew up and I
Just
did
one?
the business thing.
Just 1 degree?
Just one. I keep my toe in normal, and then I'm like, how can I do something else that's a little bit different? How can I bring something that's a little new or nuanced to the situation? Because I grew up, I did business. I did the business school thing twice. I got the MBA, and then I freaking love art, Justin. On the side, I'm sculpting, I'm painting. They're not good.
You did what your parents told you not to do and went and got a degree in art, because how are you going to use that in business?
Oh, so I was told not to, so I didn't end up doing it. And I do kind of regret it, I'm going to be honest, but I love what I did and I love the knowledge I have, and I can bring that with the element of creativity, which is kind of what we're doing today. So it did kind of work out in the end. Journeys are not linear, and you close loops a lot later in life than you realize. I'm finding that as we go on this journey. But yeah, me in a nutshell, creative, optimist, despite so many things that are going on, and somebody that understands what it's like to not feel like they belong somewhere.
As I'm listening to you describe yourself, I'm feeling there's a vibe in the workforce right now, and I feel it's very millennial driven. And I know there's been like that's kind of like a cliche thing to say. I know millennials have been blamed for a lot. And it's kind of a fun thing to do is to blame millennials, and a lot of, especially older people, still think that millennials are, the teenagers of today, and we're not. And so what I was hearing from you and where I'm kind of connecting this is your journey within your career is a very millennial perspective that we've shifted away from how can our careers serve us? Like, what's the culmination? What's our goal setting? What's the title that we can have? It is what it has been. And the millennials have shifted to this more intrinsic focus of what their careers should be for them. And that's the kind of the vibe that I'm getting from you. And I feel like is the struggle in the workforce right now is the struggle between the extrinsic job mentality, what my job can bring to that kind of stuff, and the intrinsic feel that we're now starting to seek, and I think was really kind of propelled by the pandemic, if you will. We all kind of reset our values a little bit in that way. But I'm feeling that, and it was one way where I was talking, mentioned the agency. I was talking to this agency about what they're looking for, and there's a section of older versus younger, and those mindsets that are there, extrinsic versus intrinsic. How can this benefit me versus how can I benefit you? And I felt stuck there with them for a minute. That there was even, and I think this will lead into our conversation a little bit. There was even a little bit of verbiage that was used, like, I don't want to do business with somebody that's wearing a hoodie. It like what. What is me wearing a hoodie? I wasn't wearing a hoodie at the time, but I immediately thought, what does me wearing a hoodie have to do with my value to you? I don't understand. If you're able to view me as a person and my value that I bring, what does the hoodie that I'm wearing have to do with that? And now I understand personal brand and presenting yourself in a way, but that's for me to decide. That's not for you to dictate. And, fine. If the opportunity is not there because our brand doesn't match, then, it is what it is. But I feel like that's kind of D&I or DE&I, diversity and inclusion, or diversity, equity, and inclusion is a huge buzz right now. It shouldn't be a buzz. It should be a staple. But it is a buzz right now. Any conference that I go to, any one that I talk to, DE&I comes up a lot. And I feel like that's kind of where our conversation may focus a little bit today in terms of what you're doing. You have forgive me, I've lost it. It's insureequality.org. You're the co-founder of that. What
Yep.
is insureequality.org, and how did that come about for you?
Well, first I want to address, yes, it's a very millennial feeling of just like that angst that we feel. The hoodie is a great example. And I think much of our millennial journey is very much about playing the game and then learning partway through that the game that we were taught to play wasn't meant for the time that we were playing. And so as we've gotten older, we're like, it doesn't have to be done necessarily this way. And we've tried it this way. So let's try a different method. So I think that's where we're at with it. But you hit the nail on the head with like, we hit 2020, we hit the pandemic, and then everybody's like reassessing. What does this mean for me? Is this really what I want to do? Because I had hit that point a couple of times in my career. I did underwriting. I was the line underwriter, then a staff underwriter. I did marketing rep at 2 companies. And I was like, what's next? Is this really where I am? I like insurance. There's so much potential here. There's so much room to grow. There's so many things to learn, and it changes every day. But what's next? So I moved to the agency side during that year because I was like, there are so few female agency owners and leaders. And I know that because I've worked with hundreds of agencies and you just don't see it. Anytime you would walk in and there was a woman leading an organization, I was like, oh, okay, I want to spend extra time with you. I want to learn how you got here. I want to pick your brain. So I was like, how can I do this, serve my community, and then keep the ladder down for people to come up behind? Because that was the hardest part, right? Was like navigating that field.
I love what you just said. Keep the ladder down for other people that's so visual. I love that. I've never heard that before, and I adore it.
Yeah, I mean, that conversation takes multiple forms right now because I think the feeling that I got growing up was very much, well, I had to go through this, so you have to go through it too. Almost like rite of passage, almost like joining a fraternity or a sorority. There's this feeling of like, this is your initiation. You have to walk through it to get there. And I think what we're experiencing right now with younger generations is like, no, I don't think we do. So the ladder down for me is very much, I don't think you have to go through what I went through. And frankly, I don't want you to. It shouldn't be that way. I have 3 nephews and 1 niece. And I think about my niece a lot because if she were to ask me now, and she's only 2, so she doesn't have the words for insurance yet, but if she were to ask me now, Aunt Sissy, because I'm the cool aunt with the nickname, Aunt Sissy, should I join insurance? I'm not sure what I would say. It's a phenomenal industry with a ton of potential and great wealth building, but I don't want her to have gone through what I went through, which is what I went through at that agency. It was really, really tough. I went through a lot of discrimination very quickly in a small agency with no HR department, and I felt hopeless and alone. And I will tell you, saving grace was talking with other women. We got on this call. You know this person. I won't name drop without permission, but this person hosted a weekly conference call that was just women in insurance. And, you know, sometimes we talked about insurance.
I'll name drop. Was it Meg McKean?
It was absolutely Meg McKean. Of course it was Meg McKean. Just a brilliant individual.
She is so awesome.
Without a doubt.
She can kill me later if she doesn't want the name drop, but I'm a Meg McKean fan.
Well, you know what? I'm in that club and I'm vying for a top position. But she had this weekly call, and sometimes we would talk about insurance, and sometimes it was like, is it professional or not professional to wear makeup? You know, the conversations that we would be having right now about the hoodie. And so one day there was a woman in that group and she kind of looked at me through cyberspace, kind of like we're doing right now. And she goes, what's going on? You're not yourself. Something's wrong. And so I shared what was going on. I talked about my story, and without missing a beat, every single woman in that room went around and talked about what they'd been through in the industry. And it was the coolest and the worst moment. It was so cool because for that moment, there was so much community in that room. There was that feeling of holding each other, lifting each other up, letting each other know that we weren't crazy for feeling the way that we felt, that it really did happen to us. It wasn't necessarily our fault. And then at the same time, the statistics of just that room of individuals, and there were probably 12 of us on the call, if every single one of us had a story, that means that number transcends that Zoom call. And so that's really where the start of IE happened. I dove into my computer and I spent hours researching EEOC claims, false reporting, retaliation, which is a huge topic in the insurance industry. Something that I would say thematically is the number one thing that we hear about, or that I hear about when I talk to other individuals. And I said, okay, I know I don't know everything. I know I don't have everything that I need, but I can't not do something. What do I do? And so I just started talking to everybody I could get my hands on. Anybody that was willing to have a conversation with me, I was having it. I was meeting with people on LinkedIn. I was phone calling people, everything. And within 3 months of that activity, we had a team of 4 and a board of 12, which has grown. And now a community.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And now we have a community that is rapidly growing in just the past couple months. Our impact is starting to exceed individuals.
At any point did you go, what have I done?
Yes and no. I think sometimes it's hard for me to lift my head up from where it is, which is so down and so focused in what we're doing. But the moments that we have where we kind of look up and take stock and go, we have nearly 40 pledge signers and we have over 600 lives that we've impacted so far in just what we're doing. That's pretty impactful. And for an industry that by and large doesn't talk about these conversations necessarily openly, although they have been happening more and more and more, I think we're onto something. And I think the industry is ready to start moving in that direction. You talked about D&I being a buzzword. I would add belonging to that. That's a big one that we've been talking about on our side. And you're right. It shouldn't be a buzz. It should be a staple. And I think, the analogy of doctors are the worst patients.
Yeah.
I think sometimes insurance professionals are the worst at managing their own risk as it pertains to their companies. And what I'm specifically talking about is talent. Here we have an industry with all of the potential in the world where you don't have to have a specific degree. I mean, you and I could probably round robin back and forth how many different degree types we've heard of or seen in this industry, and none of which would need to be insurance to be here. And I think that's a magical thing about this industry. And somehow we're missing. There have been mass layoffs across industries. There are so many new people coming into the marketplace. There are so many people, based on the conversation that you had recently, that are more experienced in their field, but could still transition and have those transferable skills to come in insurance. And we've been missing since before 2019. So even before all of the things that have happened in the past couple of years, there were articles published in late 2019 saying, hey, we're about to head into a talent crisis. So we're not doing what we can on our side to mitigate our internal risk of attrition. And that's, I think, the conversation that we've been having the most recently.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing that came out of that, especially as I listened back to the conversation with Tracy and Ashley, was like, is there really a talent crisis, or is there a hiring perspective crisis? Like, our minds are not in the right space. We're not viewing talent in the right way. We're seeing somebody in a hoodie as somebody we might need to write off, but that came into perspective. And so what does Insure Equality do? Or in the way of, is for somebody who's listening to the conversation, maybe in a smaller agency or a mid-sized agency, maybe they're an account manager, maybe they are just entering the insurance industry, maybe they're 20 years into the industry and have found that they have not launched still. They haven't found what really drives them within the industry because they're feeling the burden of, being, whether it's being a female in the industry or being younger in the industry or being older in the industry, they're feeling some sort of inequality. In terms of what Insure Equality does, or just in your advice in general, what steps can they start making to either have these conversations with their leadership or leadership themselves, if they're the ones that are listening? What steps can they do to gut check themselves to start being in this space of ensuring that everybody feels welcome and that we are giving equal focus to everybody?
Phenomenal questions, and I'll talk about what we do first, and then we'll start talking about some steps. And before we even get to the steps, I want to be clear, like, this is a really nuanced and ongoing conversation. There is not going to be a quick fix. You're not going to be able to just drop a couple $1,000s and then you've done the thing and you check the box and you're done. This is an ongoing journey, and it's an ongoing journey for us too.
Right. This isn't an action plan in your employee manual.
No, this is part of operations. This is part of how you continue to do work within not just your agency or organization, but your community too, because we have to remember with insurance, almost everybody is a stakeholder. you can't really get away with living in this world, in this country, in this day and age, and not interacting with insurance in some way, whether you own it yourself or your business has it. But Insure Equality, like basically what we do is we create space for conversation and we provide resources to continue those conversations. So I'll start with the resources bit because the other bit's a little heavier. So the resources piece, we can talk about that agency and a community for a second. So Chicago, right? Chicago speaks more than one language. It's not just English and Spanish. We also have a very large Polish population. I can guarantee, without even pulling numbers, that most agents don't speak Polish, Spanish, and English. They just don't. And that's okay. I don't think everybody has to be multilingual or trilingual or bilingual to work in this industry. But one of the things we were conscious about was how can we create a pool of resources that people can use so that they can access and service their communities better. And so that was something we thought about, was a language translation service. So we have that on there. We also think about people that went through what I went through, because the vast majority of our team and board knows what it's like to experience a workplace discrimination incident. So we've put a therapist on there too. So it's about creating and putting together resources, not just from an inclusivity standpoint, but also a supplier diversity standpoint that helps people manage their risk of talent, but also level up in their careers, heal whatever they need to do. The other piece of it is the conversation.
Did you just add heal in there, level up and heal?
I did add heal. I did. I don't know
I like that.
how much you've been paying attention to what we've been doing over the past month, but burnout and mental health has been a big piece of what we've been talking about, because it's often left out of the workplace conversation. Or if it is, it's kind of like, oh, they're having a bad time, or like everything is a little more hushed when you're having that conversation. But who we are as beings, we're bringing the outside in, and we have more things impacting our lives than just work. Our cat died last year. It sucked. It was awful. It was one of the worst things that happened to us last year. And that comes with me to work. So when you're talking about people or a whole person, you're also talking about every issue that they have in their life. So there's more that we can be doing, and there's more conversations that we need to be having. But I would say on the conversation piece, we've allowed people to anonymously tell their stories. I know I've alluded to retaliation before, but that is a big piece of why these conversations haven't been happening, because in every conversation I had, whether or not they decided to share their story, the two things that came up were, I thought I was the only one, and I was afraid that they were going to fire me. And that's backed up. There's 63% of EEOC claims end in termination of that employee. 63%. So that's terrifying. But the conversation,
right?
It makes you think twice about not reporting, and 60% of people don't report. So these are two really large, heavy numbers that we have to think about when we're thinking about this piece. It's a big industry we're in, right? Insurance is huge. It impacts.
It's a big one, but it's a small one.
Exactly. And that's the thing.
Oh my gosh.
Because so many people have said this exact same phrase to me, because once they were fired, or if something happened to them and that person was like, I think I'm going to say something, their boss, whoever it was, said, I will make sure you are never allowed to work in this industry again. If I had a nickel for every time I've heard that, it wouldn't just be 20 cents. It would be a lot. And so we have to think about that when we're thinking about, I'm not passing blame here and saying that this is, just a top-down issue. There's a lot of pieces to this, right? The insurance industry has experienced and is still experiencing a lot of mergers and acquisitions. So every time two companies come together, even if they're phenomenal companies, that's a cultural shift. Every time you hire somebody, and it depends on where in the industry you're playing, it depends on which companies are coming together. I remember when I was a marketing rep, two agencies that were literally across the street from each other joined, and it was a very different feel from either of the cultures that they had before to the one that they came together to create. So absolutely, those are the things that are happening. So it's not just about the conversation there, but it's also about Phoenix. You mentioned phoenixrise.org. So what we decided to do is say, how do we let people talk about how it feels to be somewhere and not have that fear embodiment? Because whether or not that fear is justified, it's very real to that individual. So how do we do our best to remove the barriers to let them talk about it? So Phoenix is the tech product that we created. It rolled out in June. And you take a survey to talk about how your experience was where you worked, not necessarily whether or not you liked it. There's sites for whether or not you liked where you work and how you would rate that site. What this is a questionnaire of how you feel working there. Do you feel safe? Do you feel like your leadership represents a diverse group of people? Do you feel like you would be retaliated against if you spoke out? How does it feel to work there? And then we translate that into different components of culture. So support, recognition, communication. And it's good on both sides. And I know the initial piece is like, oh, I don't want that out there. I don't want people saying things about me. There's no text. It's just different components. And it's good for both. And I'll explain why. For the individual side, so many people, and we've talked about generations already today, especially on the millennial and Gen Z side, want to work for a company that feels like their values are similar. So say I'm somebody that really needs a lot of recognition or support. I'm going to go to Phoenix and look for companies that are doing well in those two areas because I know I will feel supported going in, whether it's I'm onboarding, whether I've made a mistake, whether I want to like move up, I know that they will be there. And on the company side, how many times do we say that we have a specific value? We communicate it. We're doing all that we can. We're like, these are the things that we're doing that fit in that bracket. And then somehow there's a disconnect with how people are feeling or the feedback that we're getting. That's what this does. So if you're saying, hey, we're a really communicative organization and the people are answering the survey and it's really not showing, maybe it's how you're communicating with them. Maybe it's the message that you're using. And so the goal is not to condemn anyone. No one is perfect. When I went to college, I didn't excel at every single subject. No one does. People are really good at what they really like to do and what they really want to study. And that's fine if you're not the best in all of these areas. What it does do is show you where you're awesome and show you where you could really bolster and support the work that you're trying to do. And that's really IE in a nutshell.
IE in a tech nutshell.
Yes, in a tech nutshell. Absolutely.
I feel like this conversation could go in so many different directions. And I think I don't know, it's a hard conversation for me to even have as well, just because there's so much to think about. And I'm at a point in my own career journey, if you will, where I mean, I talk about it all the time, where I saw myself here at the National Alliance. But I've reached this point in my career right now. I don't want to call it a mid-career crisis, but almost like a midlife crisis where you're like, not as in what's next, as in what do I do next, but like well, this is where I saw myself landing. And now that I'm here, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of time for me to figure out, because I'm not working on reaching a next goal, because I'm not in terms of like, what's the next step in the career. And I hope this doesn't get misconstrued in any way by my leadership. Please trust me. I love everybody. But I spend a lot of time thinking about my gut feelings. I spend a lot of time, in the space of, well, if that didn't feel good, what do I need to do about it? Or does it feel good? Or maybe I was just having a rough day because I didn't get sleep, or, so I spend a lot of time in this emotional space in my career right now, not just my job role or what it is to be at the National Alliance or anything like that. It just in my career role and how that even marries with my personal life as well. So I struggle, which is why I was really happy to have a conversation with you today. I struggle in this space of, I think my millennial is catching up with me.
I hear it.
In terms of, because I think I'm on the older side of a millennial, and I tend to embody some boomer mentality, just from those being my mentors as I grew up in my career space. And then some Gen X mentality that is kind of in between, boomer or whatever too. So I was very goal oriented in my career. What's the next title? What's the next option? What's the next education piece? The check boxes, if you will. And so now I feel like my millennial is catching up with me, and it's like, but really, how do you feel about what you're doing in your career? And I think that's where these conversations start. But there's still, in terms of our industry and how it is still in this aged space, we're moving towards a better feeling, a better environment. We're not wholly there yet. The conversations have to keep going. We're moving in the right direction. It's very slow going. It's okay. But there are people that are still going to feel like they're stuck against this, I don't know, space of it's either I can't speak out, or I can't ask for what I need. I can't ask for how I can't ask for my feelings to be considered. So what are their options? How do they start generating these conversations within their agencies? Yeah, the websites are great, but I'm not a fan of jumping ship. I'm a fan of patching holes and seeing what I can make out of a ship, right? So how does somebody who's committed to their space where they're at, maybe their agency, their company or whatever, but they see some issues and they want to start those conversations, how do they do that?
It's a phenomenal question, and it's one that changes with every bit of nuance that is involved in where they work, who they work with, what the leadership is like, etc. And ignoring all of that, you just have to start. And that might involve having a conversation with your manager. Maybe you're having a one-on-one and you're like, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm thinking. But I would say in this topic that we're discussing, the onus is on everybody.
I would first say, don't go in guns blazing. And be like, I am blowing this ship up.
No, absolutely.
I'm a fan of staying on the ship, but we're going to blow the hole apart first and then patch it back. No, don't do that.
Well, yes. And I would also say the fact that we're tempering the conversation or kind of like tiptoeing into it kind of indicates where the industry is and how we know that it operates. The culture of the industry is that what you said, it's slow moving, it's little late adopter. We don't want to consider something until we know literally everything about it, which there's value in. There's totally value in understanding all of
the principles of risk management. I need to know everything.
It's underwriting.
Before I'll insure it.
Yeah, as a former underwriter, looking at the website, the address, the Yelp reviews, all of the pieces before you make the decision.
I'm loving how you're building in these elements of your underwriting role and risk management into this space of a career journey and how you're risk managing that not only for yourself but as the industry for the industry as a whole. I'm loving it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Well, that's what I said. We are making we're making that case study true of doctors are their own worst patients in a way, because I mean, should we go hashtag underwrite your risk? I mean, this is part of it is considering all of the pieces to the puzzle and also creating space and knowing that you may not have every answer before you need to make a change, and that's okay. I think one of the reasons that we get so stuck in our head as insurance professionals, and we will get to some tips, I'm sure, at some point. I know we've devolved from that, but we will get to this at some point. I think one of the reasons we get stuck in our head is because we're a very liability-driven industry. And so we are considering fault at all times, which also means we're considering mistakes. We're considering failures. And we've baked that into our culture, and we've baked that into who we are. We just put out a blog recently about understanding and learning from the mistake and being able to move on. When I was a marketing rep, I switched to another company. And as you know, there's different bonus calculations depending on what the agency is, what their goals are, et cetera. And I made the mistake of missing a field on this first go with this first agent when I was brand new at this company. And it sucked. It was awful. And then I spent a lot of time learning it. And then I was a pro. Later on, I had to take on some agencies while we were backfilling a role. And this one agency was just not trusting me that I had this down. So I told them this story. I told them about how I messed up, where I messed up, and how I learned to course correct and to resolve that. Later that day, my boss called and he asked to be taken out of my territory because he said she made a mistake and she admitted it. So I think we have to get out of our own heads a little bit and understand that we are human beings. Like, there is an element of millennial that's coming out right now because it is a little bit about feel, and it's also a little bit about understanding that the world in which we live is not perfect. We will never have the perfect amount of information to do something about it. You're gonna mess this up. You're just gonna. I've messed it up. I'll continue to mess it up. And then just like a kid, You got to get up, dust yourself off a little bit and go, all right, this is what I learned. How do I keep going? So if there's one thing I can say to anybody listening that's like, oh, I know we need to do something, or I know I have to have this conversation, or I know I want to take a next step, but I just don't know what to do. Just start. Just start. Go to our website. There's a couple of tools and tips. There's a toolkit there that you can start to learn. You can also use Google. Like, if you just want some free stuff, there's plenty of stuff on the internet. But I would say just start talking about it. If you don't have space for an ERG, an employee resource group, start talking about it at company lunch. If it's something that you want to address with management first, don't go in guns blazing, but say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. These are the issues that I'm having. I'd really like to work through this because I love where I am. I want to stay here, but this is what I think I need. And this is what I think more than just me needs to be successful here. Start having it. You might be surprised at what you get. I think fear holds us up in a lot of ways. I write myself an affirmation at the start of every week to kind of remind myself to keep going. And this week it was, your fears are not your limits. And there's a difference between fear and danger. So you might be afraid, but there might not be the risk at all that you think is there.
Amazing. I love everything. I don't think we need to dive into tips. I think we can keep it simple.
Okay.
The number one tip is just start. Then once you've just started, then you can go to Insure Equality or Google or, whatever to get the rest of your tips, because sometimes we're inundated with too many tips and it's too overwhelming. So just start is tip number one for the podcast episode. Just start. Just have that. All right. Finally, what would you like to be known for?
My heart. I think when I was younger, I really wanted to prove myself. I embodied a lot of the boomer mentality we're talking about of like, I had goals, I had steps, I had check boxes, I had the to-do list. I was like ready and there. And I wanted to be known for my intellect, my skill, the position, the mark that I left wherever I was. And the older I've gotten, the more I just want to care. And the more I want people to know me about that and be able to feel like they can come to me with whatever it is they need to come to, whether it's a sibling, a partner, a stranger, whoever it is. My door is always open, and that's how I want to be known.
I love that. And I love that there are individuals like you that are strong enough to take on that role, that responsibility, that burden at times, because in the mix of all of that and wanting to be known for that and take on to help others, sometimes we lose ourselves. So it takes a really strong individual. And I don't know you entirely too well. I have cyberstalked you quite a bit. So there is that. But I do feel like you have the strength to be able to do that for others as well as yourself, which is why you're an amazing human being. And I cannot wait to see everything that you do in the future, because I know that this Insure Equality has just gotten started. So you have so much more amazing ventures ahead of you. And if there is anything that I can ever do to help you, I don't even know how I would be involved, but please feel free to reach out to me. I mean, because it's exciting stuff. And there's a lot for me to learn, even in terms of just sitting on the sidelines and watching what people like you and Meg McKean and Sarah Muniz and Monica Adwani, holy crap. She just blows my mind with the way she puts herself out there, where I'm constantly like, I look at Monica and I start buttoning up my shirt and I'm like, I don't know if I can be as out there as some of these other, but I mean, there's a lot to learn from that. So kudos to you. Congratulations for everything that you're doing with Insure Equality. Thank you for saying yes to me. And I have had an amazingly fun and just informative time with you today.
I have too. I will try not to second guess it, and I'll ask that you try not to do that too. But thank you for creating the space, for elevating the message, and likewise, if you ever need anything, my door's open.
Thanks for hanging out and listening to another Awkward Insurance Conversation.
If you haven't already, be sure to join the Awkward Insurance Facebook community. We have an amazing group of people on there.
And for more episodes, head over to the National Alliance website at scic.com. Now go forth and be awkward. Toodles!
That's awkward.